Good evening, everyone. We're going to get this rolling so we can get on with our day and our evening. We know it's hot out, so enjoy the air conditioning. I will flick it off in a couple minutes because you all know it is very loud when we turn it on. So as most of you know, you're here for a reason. It's to learn a little bit more about the pilot programs. This evening, we're actually joined by Jeff Campbell of Great Lakes Housing Services. Jeff started his career as an attorney before transitioning to public service, where he served as the Community Development Director and Director of Legal Services for the city of Hazel Park for over a decade before actually heading up to our neighbors in Beverly Hills, where he served as village manager. About a year ago, Jeff joined Great Lakes Housing Services as their VP of Consulting, where he has empowered communities through technical support, advocacy, and strategic development to bring housing projects to life. After Jeff's presentation, Jeff will be able to answer some questions about pilot programs in general. If you have any specific questions related to Lathrup Village's potential pilot ordinance, those are going to be best directed to City Council, which meets again for a study session on July 7th, and then a study session, a regular meeting on July 21st, where a pilot ordinance adoption will be under consideration. So if you guys can please help me welcome Jeff to the stage, we'll get this going.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. He kind of went through my introduction, stole a little thunder, so it might shorten up the already short presentation. But I am with Great Lakes Housing Services. Great Lakes Housing Services, I'll explain basically what it is. Initially, it was called Michigan Homeowner Assistance Nonprofit Housing Corporation, which was a nonprofit that's such a mouthful. It served its purpose. It was started by MSHDA, the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, in 2010. It met its purpose. It was repurposed last year to provide gaps in the housing ecosystem. I was their first employee, the VP of Consulting Services. We have several different arms that we do. We help distressed properties. We actually purchase some distressed properties that MSHDA might have financed, put them back on the market after they've stabilized. That's one thing of what we do. We are a Michigan-based nonprofit. It's a statewide organization. We're set up sort of like the MEDC Community Assistance Technical Team, where we have locations. I cover the entire east side of the state. A colleague of mine covers the west side, and then we have somebody who covers the northern Lower Peninsula and the UP, and you'll see who they are. We are independent of MSHDA. While we were propped up by MSHDA and given our initial funding by MSHDA, we are governed by an independent board of directors, and we are really here to help and assist, provide expert consulting and technical assistance to local municipalities, mostly in nonprofits. We do provide third-party assistance for CDBG projects, but that has nothing to do with this. Basically, I'm free of charge to be here tonight, and basically free of charge for most municipal services we provide, unless it's very extensive technical assistance. So this is our team, and I'll just be brief. So that's Ashley McLeod, that's our executive director. She was with the city of Detroit and also has worked in the private sector, as well as with community development finance institutions, such as Capital Impact Partners in Detroit. Liz Smith is our person on the west side of the state, and she has worked for the Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago, as well as the Colorado and Illinois housing authorities, which is similar to MSHDA, and she's been looking at financial aspects of deals, especially low affordable housing deals, for over 20 years. And Nikki Bosch is our representative in the northern part of the state. She worked for the Grand Traverse Band, tribal band, and she actually does, she's our tribal liaison too. So just the scope of what we do, so that you know I'm not some Yahoo, so to speak. And as Michael indicated, I'm originally a land use attorney, then a healthcare law attorney, then as my board chair says, I'm a recovering attorney, and went back and became got my master's in urban planning from Wayne State, and then worked as a community development director for Hazel Park for 10 plus years, did some legal stuff there as well, and then was the village manager in Beverly Hills for 2 years. So what we do, we further Michigan's statewide housing plan. Michigan actually published a statewide housing plan in 2022. It's a long document. It has 37 action goals. That's a lot of goals. I'm not going to list them all out here. But the basic crux of it is Michigan's in need of 115,000 additional housing units. And again, we're here to assist municipalities, particularly assist municipalities with their local access to available tools, particularly MSHDA tools. MSHDA has several programs that we help forward so communities understand them. The state government always thinks that the locals know what the programs that are available to them are. They're wrong. They don't generally. And it's not locals' fault, it's just an assumption I think that the state makes incorrectly. And we help with grants, local legislation such as Workforce Pilot Ordinance. So what is the Workforce Pilot Ordinance? The pilot has been around for a number of years, for decades. It was normally associated with low-income housing tax credit, which serves a much lower area median income, so people on the lower end of economic stability, and under the legislation, payment in lieu of taxes was provided to those projects because the rents were so low. And in 2022, at the very end of 2022, the state legislature saw that there was a need for workforce housing. It wasn't being built for numerous reasons, mostly because the need for a subsidy is to fill the gap that exists, and they're not being built, so incentives are provided to make sure that these needed units are built for workforce housing. So under a pilot, in lieu of receiving taxes, the municipality from a housing development, the owner pays the municipality agreed upon fee for a certain number of years. Generally speaking, that's 15 years, or it could be renewed depending on the ordinance. Eligible new or rehabilitated housing must be affordable to and occupied of households of up to 120% area median income. Very briefly, area median income is published by HUD. It's different and differs from county to county. You'll see where Oakland County falls. Oakland County is included in the Warren, Detroit mega sort of census area. And to take advantage of a pilot, a municipality must have an ordinance or resolution concerning the selection of eligible developments. How you calculate the fee that you would receive instead of the taxes, and under Lathrup Village's ordinance, which is similar to almost every other pilot ordinance that has been enacted, proposed ordinance, excuse me, the city can receive up to 10% of the annual shelter rent. Annual shelter rent means the actual rent charge, not utilities associated with the rent or the use of the unit. The service charge must not exceed basically the property taxes that the owner would have paid had the project not been tax exempt. So it can range. It's negotiable upon whatever proposal is submitted to the city. It's not this ordinance isn't based on one project per se. It can apply to several different projects that might apply to the Lathrup Village for a pilot exemption. So, for instance, for one it could be 7%, for one it could be 8%, for one it could be 10%. It's all dependent on what the city agrees to and what council agrees to and what the public values. So, looking at workforce rent limits, and I want to talk about this just in the sense of really how high area median income is under this ordinance and what is actually availavailable. So, based on, when you talk about workforce or attainable housing, generally you're looking at 80 to 120% AMI, and that can go as low as 60%. So these are the rent limits for a proposed pilot. For a studio or zero bedroom is what they call it, at 80%, you can see it all. But I would say that 120% AMI is almost equivalent to market rates in most communities, not just Lathrup Village, that's most communities. So it is an actual, it's truly a benefit to get these built even at, so basically if it's beyond market rate, the project isn't going to pencil and nobody's going to build it. And even at even at calling 120% market rate allows you to provide incentives to them to get projects actually built in communities where the rent doesn't allow for what and as everybody knows, the cost of construction, supply chain, tariffs, all these things lead to higher costs for building, whether it's affordable housing projects or attainable housing projects or workforce housing projects, or even most industry. Some incentives are required. I was at the city of Hazel Park and oversaw the transition of the racetrack into what it is now, and that required millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in incentives, nowhere near what this would be. So other communities have enacted workforce housing pilot ordinances throughout the state. City of Jackson is a leader in it. They are doing it in several different ways. So they have a ton of vacant infill properties that they are putting houses on, and actually those are like 1,600 square foot rentals, as well as they're using them for big projects. The Hayes Hotel in downtown Jackson, which is working to be rehabbed, will probably use the pilot as well as other multifamily projects as well. So those are new builds and rehabs of existing. The city of Ferndale recently has enacted a pilot ordinance very similar to yours, or proposed, and they have approved one multifamily unit that is not yet under construction. The city of Muskegon is looking at infill multifamily. I think they've approved a few single-family vacant lots. The city of White Cloud's interesting. That's a population of 1,467. It's a rural community in Newaygo County. The city of Detroit, I believe late last year, enacted their pilot ordinance, and just in the last month, I believe they came out with the regulations associated with that. And the city of Lansing is still working on theirs regulations, but they have passed the basic initial ordinance. So who are we targeting? Who is generally the target for workforce housing development? It's basically your essential workers. It's people that work in your community but couldn't afford to live here because the mortgages are too high, the housing prices are just too high. So you focus in on teachers, nurses, police officers, right? And yes. Sorry. So, yeah, no, that's fine. So, and I'll just speak louder, the theater voice in me. So basically, it's teachers, nurses, police officers, folks like that, or even young professionals. When I was a starting attorney, I couldn't afford to be at the 128% AMI rate that was noted previously. It could be retail employees, young professionals when I was starting out. And the question that, as a community, that you have to ask yourself and that the council has to ask itself are, do we want the people who protect us, care for us, and serve us, and teach our children to be able to live in the community that they work? And I will say this, Lathrup Village has there it is, has basically one housing typology. 92% of Lathrup Village's housing units are owner-occupied residential homes. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a stable thing. And 89.2% of those housing units are single-family residential homes. However, as we'll talk about in a little bit, I think a variety of housing topology makes a community more resilient. It makes it economically more stable, and so on. But based on the data, there's a lack of other housing typologies, particularly multifamily units. I believe most of the multifamily units range from 2 to 9 unit developments, and that's just the MISTA number. They might not be 9 development units. They might be duplexes that exist around the city of Lathrup Village. So what are the positives to adding those different types of housing typology? Improved property values. This is from the Urban Institute. Well-managed communities with diverse housing, they increase property values, making them attractive for residents and investors. Increased economic activity, they create a wider customer base, stimulating local businesses and increased economic development. They can increase residents' disposable income because they're not cost burdened by really expensive mortgages or really expensive rent. Cost burdening is an epidemic that exists throughout the state of Michigan where people are spending more than 30% on whether it's their mortgage or their rent. And economic resilience, communities with diverse housing types tend to be more resilient against economic downturns. If there were different housing types, for instance, after the Great Recession, there might not have been as many tax foreclosures, mortgage foreclosures in Lathrup Village or in any other community that I've ever been in that were hit. In Hazel Park, that we averaged 4 foreclosures, whether it was mortgage or tax, per block. So, and it's a way to attract and retain talent. The housing preferences of a younger generation are different. So we'll just briefly talk about that. Millennials don't look, or the millennial generation doesn't look at housing preferences the same. They want smaller, more affordable housing options in denser environments than their parents. They're getting married later, they're not having as many children. Their apartments are now frequently seen as a more permanent housing choice. And it's not, you know, I initially lived in Berkeley with the idea before the Great Recession that we'd be there for 2 years, and then we lost half the value of our house, stayed there for 15 years. But so it goes, right? But it was a stepping stone to something else. People in millennial, Gen Z, they don't see it the same way. And the other thing is retired boomers are seeking different types of housing options, especially with, for instance, in many of the communities I've been in that didn't have one-level homes, they were two-level homes that just where my in-laws, for instance, just didn't use the second level of their house after a while. So it's giving options to those folks as well. I think the goal of most places is to engage in meaningful placemaking, to make it an attractive place that people want to live, work, and play, right? And what this is from the Michigan State Extension, it's an article, basically that we need to have places with a level of walkability, housing choice, that will attract these folks. And we need, especially smaller cities and towns, we need to look at placemaking activities that enhance the living experience of our folks. And by doing this, communities become more attractive to talented workers and others entering the housing market. So that's basically it. Now, I will say this. I don't know that anyone is a pilot expert on workforce housing pilot because it's so new. I might not have all the answers to your questions, but what I will do is I will make sure and write them down, and if there are issues that I am unaware of or need additional education on or need to answer you guys, I will get you those answers. I just don't want to BS you, okay? I'm here to provide some guidance, some background, and whatever I can answer, I will answer, and whatever I cannot, I will say I don't know, and I'll try to get you an answer subsequently, okay? Thank you. Questions?
If you have questions, please go to the lectern so we can catch up.
Hi, Jonathan Terra. Can you clarify the areas that we're talking about? That are we talking about in doing the calculations? Are we talking about Oakland County or the entire SMSA?
It's Oakland County, if you looked at that, so those were Oakland County specific, but it applies to the entire SMSA.
I'm still confused then. Which is it?
It's both. They're the same.
How is it both? Is there a formula that combines the two?
It's a HUD-based formula. No, they're not combined. They're just all
It's a formula that draws from both of those?
Yes.
So,
it draws from the entire region, but it's just broken out. And
so it's somehow weighted by the county?
No, it's just they're given so if you were to pull up Wayne County,
Yeah.
right, it would have the same 80%, 120 or 100%, 120% AMI rent limits as it would in Oakland County. They're just distinguished by counties in the income list.
So all three would be the same?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so there's no reason to mention the county. It's the same number anywhere in the SMS.
But if you were to look it up on the income rent limits and income limits
Yeah.
for yourself, it wouldn't show up.
It's listed by county. It's
Correct.
not listed by SMSA.
Correct.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
why it's mentioned in the county, is if anyone had a reference point, you could reference it yourself.
Lillian, I live here in Lathrup Village. Can you break it down in a way that if I was going to take this information back and explain it to my kids, because I don't understand. I have a house here.
Yeah.
So how would this benefit me as a homeowner? Is it if I decide to rent my home, then that tax situation comes into play? Or if I get some money somehow and decide to build something here, if there's a proper space became available? Could you explain it a little better?
So, yeah, I don't, if you were to rent out your property, unless you did rehab or tore it down and built a new home to be rented, I don't think the pilot would apply. However, to your point, if you found a piece of vacant land and you wanted it to remain affordable or attainable, you could apply for this if it made sense, and then you would have, you could be eligible for the pilot. The other thing that was mentioned is a multiplier effect for a resident. It would improve, potentially could improve your property values as you are. And it can end up providing a more robust, better place to live overall.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ian Citron, I may misunderstand what is being proposed here in Lathrup Village, so this could be my ignorance coming on full display. I warn you all. The pilot, as I understand it, is dedicated towards the development of the school, the Annie Lathrup School. Is that correct? Isn't that where?
Yeah, I believe it's being, some of this
Okay,
is.
well,
Sorry, I'll let.
yeah. Okay.
So partially, as Jeff was saying, the pilot could apply to any development that comes to town.
I
Yes,
understand.
this is what spurred
Okay.
spurred the conversation.
I understand that. Okay, and the idea of affordable housing for people who look after us, teach us, etc., is great. In this specific case, and this is where this is really what I don't know, is how much of that proposed redevelopment will actually be dedicated to people within those income brackets? Is it entirely? Is it going to be entirely dedicated to people like firefighters, cops, teachers, retail workers in the community, people whom I agree we need to house? Or are there going to be two types of residents within there?
So I would say if they want to be eligible for the pilot, it would include everybody. So like, you can't get a payment in lieu of taxes. You can't get off of your tax bill or waive your tax bill unless the entire project is part of the pilot.
Okay, so that is to say, and I'm sorry, this is probably more related to you than you. I think the idea of the pilot is great. But in the specific case of this development, what's the plan? How are the housing units going to be distributed? Are they going to be all, not low income, but, affordable housing? Or is there going to be a section which is going to be, sort of upmarket?
Yeah, that part's still going to be to be determined. So the
Okay.
next steps for us, council needs to adopt the pilot ordinance first. They're potentially going to do that, their July regular meeting. After that, the applicant has to submit a formal application with what their ask is. At that point, we will know 100% if they are going all units at 100%, 20% AMI, and then that could be the case, or what their range is going to be.
Okay.
But that's going to be part of the negotiations during the application process.
But we have to approve this has to be approved in place before we get to the specifics.
Correct, yeah. City council has to approve a pilot ordinance before we can get to that step.
Okay, so which then leads me to my next question, which again is directed to you, and not, I'm terribly sorry. I don't mean to preempt your presentation, but this is after a while, why we're here.
Yeah, this is what we're here for, so.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So is the redevelopment of the school, as I have seen images of it, contingent upon adopting a pilot program?
That'd be up to the developer, but from what we heard so far, yes.
Okay.
Based on the size of the project, they would need something like this, plus some help from the state to make this reality.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say this, whether it's a pilot or other programs, it's usually a mix of the incomes. It could be 60% AMI for some units, but they subsidize that with making 120% so they even out, so the rents, so it can pencil, so it makes sense, so they're not losing money. So it could be, you could have 50 units at 80% AMI and the other 50 at 120% AMI. But again, that's negotiable with Lathrup Village, and any municipality that wants to enter into a pilot agreement.
So I'm not gonna go all the way up, because this is quick. So I apologize, because I was late and I missed your type. I saw the end of it. Oh, sorry. I apologize. I apologize, I was late, and I missed your entire presentation. I came in on the end, and of course, it's like, "Meow," and all the questions. But, and it's probably gonna be for you, but I just wanted to know, so I know they're filming this, so this will be available to Lathrup Village, YouTube, or the website, or, and do you have any, are you handing out any of your presentation? No.
Oh, yeah, it's for you guys, it's on public.
Yeah. So if you want to stick around, we can print some afterwards. I didn't print any beforehand.
And I'm gonna leave a bunch of business cards as well, so anyone.
Okay.
But yeah, it's being recorded for a purpose because we know a lot of people can't make it here, especially when we only had essentially a week notice. But it will be on YouTube by the end of the week, and then for anyone to watch, and the presentation will be up there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Tim Hillman. Thank you for hosting this, by the way. I appreciate it. The city of Ferndale approved a pilot agreement for a project called Vester Flats. Very familiar with those? For those in the audience, if you've ever been to Valentine Distillery, there's a parking lot immediately west of it, and there's a project there called Vester Flats, into which the city of Ferndale entered a 15-year pilot agreement. This is about that project, not about the Cerno project or any other potential project in Lathrup Village, but in reading about that project, I had some general questions. So I promise this is a general question, not a specific question to a pilot agreement that hasn't been proposed yet. I'm going to read because I'll butcher it if I don't. According to the MEDC, that pilot agreement included community enhancements, quote unquote. For example, the developer contributed to public art, utility upgrades, a more pedestrian-friendly streetscape along Vester, and also improvements to the alleyway. In that scenario, the developer also issued payment to help offset the city's costs related to processing that pilot agreement. Are these types of kind of cherries on top common, and are they bound to some type of legal limitation, et cetera? Does that question make sense to you?
Yeah, before I let Jeff kind of go with it, we did talk about this last study session because we talked about community enhancements with it. One thing about Vester Flats that's different, it was a PUD. So with PUD rezoning, you can require certain community enhancements as part of your rezoning. You can't specifically require that in our pilot ordinance, but it is something we are discussing it with city council on what we could potentially do, kind of offset that gap between the pilot payment and the taxes.
So you can, I realize the PUD of it all. I realize the PUD of it all is an important distinction, but is there anything stopping council from negotiating some of these quote-unquote cherries into future potential pilot agreements they start to negotiate in Lathrup Village?
So that's initially, I would say, I don't know the answer. I haven't seen, and I don't think in, for instance, the city of Jackson, they apply because they're basically single-family units, and I got to look at what community enhancements there might have been on some multifamily projects there. The sort of additional incentives Jackson provided, this is sort of irrelevant, but they're providing free tap fees and sort of driveway cuts as well. So it depends, right? It's basically set up by the agreement, but I think it's a reasonable question to figure out what other communities are doing, or if it's sort of untapped, and also making sure that you're not voiding, though, the pilot or the agreement by going outside the limits of what the law allows. It's probably gray right now, is what I would say.
Tim, I can say council's fully aware of like what happened in Ferndale, and we're looking to see what our ability is legally. But it is something on our radar and something we would hope to do, whether it's part of the pilot or a kind of pseudo agreement.
Thank you.
Good evening, Roger Lynn. Thank you for the presentation. Trying to get my arms around how much, in lieu of taxes, the city will get you know, for their tax, you know, how much the city will actually get. I think your presentation said up to 10% of the rent.
Of the rents.
And have the rents been sort of already identified for this project that we're talking about? Was that one of your presentations yet? Or sheets
No, that's
on
just
the
that's the potential maximum rents for each AMI and each bedroom unit. So the rents are established on that on a document. But I think that's a negotiation between the developer and the city of Lathrup Village.
So that hasn't been established yet, what the rent will be for the studio, for the one-bedroom or a two-bedroom, for this, for the school program yet?
So that negotiation will be the next step. So first, we need to actually have the legal framework in place to actually engage in negotiations with any developer, not just for next door, but for any other site in the city. So every developer will have to submit an application, and part of that application is a fee, which covers the processing. And then at that point, they will engage with city council in the city for the negotiation of what the fee will be in lieu of taxes.
And that could go up to, but not exceeding 10% of the rent?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And the other caveat, it can't exceed what they would normally pay in taxes otherwise.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So that answered part of my question, which was going to be, is there a negotiation, an individual negotiation with each development on that rate?
Yes,
Okay, so another development came in, it might be a different rate.
correct.
Do we have any idea what, I mean, some numbers were expressed in terms of dollars per year, but expressed as a percentage. Do we have a ballpark here that, you know, and, you know, I suppose neither side should tip their hand, but
Well,
if it's been
if
talked
you
about, it's
want-
been talked about.
If you want to do the ballpark, we got the estimate from Oakland County of what taxes would be, fully developed, full tax. Be like $600,000 a year. The city keeps about 50% of that, so city or DDA would actually get about $300,000. If you want to do quick,
No, I mean the 0
yeah.
to 10%.
If you want to do that,
expressed,
you could use the HUD data Jeff shared, times that by 140 units, times that by 10%, and you'd get a rough number.
No, but that's
Yeah.
the maximum.
Yep, and then you just have to multiply it by each percentage to kind of get an idea. But we have not started those negotiations with them, so.
Maybe to you, what's typical?
Maybe even better question, instead of what's typical, what would the city want? Because the city would want to, you know, have that space and have money to keep the city going financially.
I think there is no such thing as typical because it's so new, is what I would say, right? I've heard mostly 7% is the general number that is used for a lot of the deals that the pilot deals that I've seen. And it's about what your value is. If the main value is to get as much revenue as you can in, then yes, you want it as many at 120% AMI and get as 10% of those rents as you can. But there's also some value in potentially having differing levels of affordability within that 60 to 120% AMI, so that you can allow some of the other folks, the teachers who might not make as much money as the police officers, to be able to live in this facility as well. It's a question for the community and for the type of people, or the type of housing use you really want to create in the city. And I think as the data shows, a diverse income level increases the value, provides as much as people at the highest income level will. So.
Excuse me. To this point, you mentioned Jackson.
Yeah.
Is there a unit in Jackson that shows what the, like, this is a diverse community here, it has those mixtures, and this is how much money you got from this?
They haven't gotten any money yet, okay? So they've just finished the constructions of some of the units. I don't even know if that they haven't dispersed a payment in lieu of taxes yet. I probably can get you a copy of what some of the deal is. I believe it's, yeah, I don't have the number off my head to know if it was 10%, 9%, 8%, 7%. Again, it's a lot of those were done by one developer for 100+ homes, even though it's vacant infill. It's Allen Edwin Homes, so it's all dependent. So.
Diane Anderson, and I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm always concerned when I hear Jackson, Detroit, Lansing, because Lathrup was founded as a small 1.5 square mile upper middle class bedroom community. So there's no relationship to big cities like that. And I'm concerned that given that there is an absolute glut of apartments in the upmarket, our neighbors in Birmingham, Beverly Hills, Royal Oak, Berkeley, there's just so many vacancies that my concern is this thing goes up, and can they keep lowering and lowering and lowering the cost, which would bring in a different sort of person altogether. Teachers have been living in Lathrup. They can well afford houses in Lathrup since the 90s. We've had nurses in Lathrup since the 90s. The kind of people you're talking about wanting to bring in, they've been in Lathrup since the 90s. They haven't needed something special. So my question, first of all, with this glut of apartments around, we certainly don't need any. And of course, Southfield's going to put in that great big complex with, 754 units opposite the City Hall. And then the Northland development is going to have a whole glut of extra apartments as well. So what happens when you've got this white elephant that has got all these vacancies? Do they keep getting to lower and lower and lower the rents in order to just fill them up? And then the second part of my question, this particular site, this is our parkland. This is the only place we ever had for baseball, for basketball, all the things we did was there. That's going to be turned into a parking lot. So does the pilot program approve of getting rid of green space and turning it into parking lots?
Annie Lathrop Park is the largest green space in Lathrop Village, and yes, it is.
This is the Cerno group talking, but for somebody who's been here since '51, whose family built the first house in Lathrop after the war, who went to Lathrop School, there were 2 baseball diamonds. There was a basketball court. There was a great tennis court. There was a track. There was playground equipment. This has always been the beating heart of Lathrop. There is no other parkland like that. There's a little bit behind the City Hall. There's a postage stamp park at the end of Saratoga for little tiny kids, and there's another little tiny kid park opposite the right next to the freeway where you can breathe in healthy carbon monoxide with your kids. But the only place that we have ever had for large-scale recreation of the type I've mentioned, baseball, basketball, all that thing, that is Annie Lathrop School, and that is going to be turned into a parking lot. So I would like to know what the pilot scheme people say about taking green space and turning it into a parking lot.
No, the site plan does not include Annie Lathrop Park. Annie Lathrop Park will remain untouched. It will remain as it is today.
Sorry, Annie Lathrop Park is not what we're talking about. You are going to pave over what had been the baseball diamonds. You are going to pave over what had been the track. You're going to pave over what had been all of the things I have mentioned and make it a parking lot. Quit dissembling. Those of us who have been here, who played on these areas, who know all about it, who know that that was the beating heart of Lathrop, we want to know, does the pilot scheme encourage this anti-environmentalism, because it's also going to be concrete for the parking lot. So it'll be more concrete in Lathrop that never was there before. Please quit disseminating this information that Annie Lathrop Park is what you're not taking. You are taking the areas that traditionally, from 1927 when that school was built, right up to the modern era, because even when it was the charter schools, we could use it at the weekends. Now there will be no such parkland, so I want to know, does the pilot scheme approve of getting rid of a city's only large parkland, and that's the only parkland, and turning it into a parking lot and paved.
Ma'am, that's a value judgment. The pilot doesn't say, it doesn't make any environmental, or it's a judgment for Lathrup Village, its residents, its council, those folks. It's not. Hey, would you? I don't know the answer to that. It's somewhat dependent on the agreement, right? I think that it could be set forth in the agreement what those rents are. It's just basically what the ordinance does is establish what the maximum is, okay? I understand your point, but I just said you can try to counteract it with the agreement. If you disagree or are unhappy with that answer, I understand.
I'm late for the gym, but I wanted to make a comment. So right now we have a building that's up there that's sitting that is not bringing any benefit to the city at all. And when you talk about it's affordable for teachers, I was in a meeting with an attorney that worked at Sam Bernstein Law Firm, a very, high-profile law firm. And I told him where I lived. He said, we looked for a house there, we couldn't afford it. And I looked strange, because I'm like, well, I live there. But he said he couldn't find a house that was affordable, so he moved to Detroit. So I think we need to open up our mind to see the way that the city was built on. There is change, and change is coming. I don't think that our leadership would negotiate a deal that would take us from something that is going to benefit us to something to allow it to go below the threshold of what they're trying to achieve in order to bring more revenue into the city. The concern seems to be based on certain types of people moving into the community. Well, we're here. We're not leaving. So you can count on that the diversity is here and it's not going to change. But I think we need to look at this from an open perspective, and that's why we come to these meetings, so that we can say, hey, City Council, when you vote on this, we want to make sure that a percentage of the households don't go below the 180, 120, or the 80% that you showed us. Those are things that we put these people in these positions, and now we're voicing these opinions, and you guys are going to take that back. Matt is great at putting that information in the newsletters and things like that. So he's going to take that information back. But I think the thing is, this is either we have just a building sitting there growing dust and doing nothing, or have a chance to have a mixed use. I fortunately have a son that is an architect, just got his degree. You can make a mixed use building where it still has land. There's also things that you can do from a sustainability perspective as you build, so that what we're building gives back to our city from a sustainability perspective. It's time to open up our minds and look at this from a different perspective where it can benefit all of us. We all need Lathrup Village to be financially stable. So let's open our minds and look at this and see what it can really benefit. And by those examples from Jackson is not that big. It's not as big as Detroit. It's small, it's sort of country. There's some similarities to Lathrup Village. We saw that it worked well in Ferndale. Thank you for that example, because you brought it back to my memory. Now I understand why that art is there. So this is an example of why this can be a great thing that could benefit our community. But we have to keep our open mind and look for the diversity that's great, that's here and still coming, no matter what.
Sorry, I've got another question. And Ian, I think I overheard you utter something along this line, so maybe I'm asking your question too. The proposed development at the Annie Lathrup site is not entirely residential. There are some commercial spaces at the base of that building. I'm WeWork style short-term lease stuff, office space. I'm curious how those types of portions of these developments interact with the pilot agreements at all, or if they're handled completely separately.
I believe it would be separate, like you would bifurcate what the residential taxes would be versus what the commercial taxes would be.
Yeah, if it's a true commercial separate entity type of thing, it would be taxed as a regular business. But anything adjacent, so if they have for example, if they have a gym, that's an amenity to the complex, that portion would count as the residential part. So it'd have to be a true dedicated commercial space for that to be taxed separately.
Is that not indeed part of the plan, that it should be a mixed development and there will be commercial spaces for renting?
They've mentioned dedicated commercial spaces like a WeWork type of place, but the majority of it will be associated with the residential development, where there will be some aspects that will be open to the community at certain times, such as the gymnasium and things like that. But for the most part, it's all going to be associated with the residential development.
Okay, so independent businesses are not, it is not expected that independent businesses will set up shop there.
As of right now, correct.
So first, I wanted to ask, is this just questions from here on out, or are there additional presenters, additional segments?
Jeff's our only presenter today. Sorry, Jeff. So yeah, it's just questions. Then, like I mentioned, when we kick this off, City Council does meet again July 7th. We'll talk about the pilot some more, and then on the 21st, they are considering formal adoption of pilot ordinance.
Okay. So I wanted to respond to something, and I had thought this out before this meeting, that was said earlier, and that comes up again and again and again. If you look at the history of Lathrup Village, and you look at it carefully, it was designed as workforce housing. Okay? Why else would you have a free shuttle bus to take you to Royal Oak, to get on the trolley line or buses and go to your work and come back home? They didn't call it workforce housing, okay? But it was the same mix of people you're talking about. I just recently found out something that I'm following up with the Historical Society to see if we can research this more. But I recently became aware that a house up the street from me used to have, in the maybe 40s, 50s, I'm not sure exactly when, 2 or 3 basement apartments for teachers. Okay, so there was a need, and that need was fulfilled. It may not be highlighted. It may not be highlighted in the history books yet, but I'm aware of at least one. I'll bet there were more. Okay, this community was designed for workers and working families, and we're describing the same, demographic that that was put forth. If you read ads, if you read, history, that was the design. Okay. So I don't see it as being, I don't see that as being counter to the history of Lathrup Village, fundamentally. As far as the particular development, I don't want to get too much into that. I've brought this up before. I would not want to live in a shared housing development where you have to walk out to a surface level parking lot, okay, in the snow in the middle of winter and go out and clear off we're not even talking about covers, I've suggested, and I realize this is this will come in the future, but I've suggested, hey, how about underground parking? I've asked, is it feasible? Is there some reason? It thinks I just took a hard fall. I'll stop gesturing. But that's all I have to say about that.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Jeff, for coming out.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for coming out. Tell your friends, like I mentioned, this is recorded. It will be on YouTube within the next couple days. You can share, get more people involved. And next city council study session will be July 7th, where we will continue this discussion. Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night. Stay cool.